Good evening. Oops. Ellen, Malala, and Laverne. 3 women who I believe to be renegades. 3 women who have earned a badge of honor for being trailblazers in society. Never did I think that I would be compared to any of them. When I think of myself, I think of a middle child, the peacekeeper, and someone whose guilty pleasure is spending an afternoon on the couch reading old copies of Sky Mall magazine. Now, I'm not sure about you, but when I envision Malala, I do not think of her sitting around reading Sky Mall magazine. So naturally, when I found out the theme for tonight was the Renegades, initially I panicked. I just didn't see how I fit in. But as I began to explore tonight's theme, I realized that in large part, many of the decisions that I've made throughout my life have in some way, at least outwardly, addressed powerful and invisible barriers in today's society. And I defined 3 moments in my life where I had a choice of conformity or defying society's expectations put on me to follow my own heart. Now, I'll talk about my 3 defining moments tonight, but I ultimately came down to the definition of how I view myself, which is an undercover renegade accelerated to acclaim by the nuances of being a millennial in the 21st century. Now, if you are a millennial, which most of us in this room are, there's a good chance that you have a strong emotional tie to one of 3 things: entrepreneurship, social justice, and social media. And these 3 things play greatly into my story and into the 3 defining moments in my own life. The first defining moment happened when I was 15 years old. It was the first day of my junior year of high school. Without consulting anybody, I marched to the principal's office and I simply asked, how can we make this the first day of my senior year? So that night at dinner, I announced to my mother that I would now be graduating with my sister, who was 2 years my senior. And at 15 years old, I began applying for and being denied by universities who were concerned about the maturity of an upcoming 16-year-old freshman. 9 months later, after my sister gently tripped me across the graduation stage, I chose the University of Central Florida, and I packed up my Pontiac Sunfire and drove 450 miles south to move into my new dorm in Orlando, Florida. The second defining moment of my life is perhaps the biggest. It's the one that you heard about tonight. It was when I was decided to come out as lesbian. Now, growing up, I was raised in a small town in South Carolina, but my family was liberal, and I always knew that when I was ready to come out, that my family would be accepting, so I was in no hurry. However, every few years, my mom would knock on my closet door just to make sure I wasn't ready yet. But when I was ready, still, it was a very big thing for me to work up the courage to tell my family and to finally verbalize it, which for me made it official. So I finally worked up the courage to tell my mom, and I finally said, "Mom, I'm lesbian." And she said, "Honey, I have known that since you were 6 years old. Now, where do you want to go to lunch?" Again, one more time in my life where I thought I was being undercover, and my cover was blown. Now, coming out as a lesbian in college is a very confusing time. Coming out in general is very confusing, and there's a lot of things to sort out within yourself. But I decided to break the heart of my high school boyfriend and just live openly as who I am. I really wanted to be accepted by the LGBT community. So one of the first things I did was join a club called Equal at the University of Central Florida. This was an alliance group for the LGBT community and the student body. So, just in Erin fashion, I'm very feminine. So I showed up to the first meeting in a dress, high heels, and a full face of makeup. And I felt like these people were looking at me like, who is this straight girl coming to our meeting? So then, for the second meeting, I just went the opposite direction. I showed up in a beanie, flannel, and Birkenstocks. Now, that didn't fit me either, and it was about 95 degrees in Orlando, so that wasn't very comfortable. So ultimately, I just had to decide that yes, I was gay, and no, that did not mean I had to give up my love of high heels, makeup, and dresses. So for the second time in my life, I was able to defy what society projected upon my life and go my own way. The third and most recent defining moment in my life was about 2 years ago when I decided to compete for the title of Miss Missouri. I was sitting in the living room of my grandmother's house watching the woman before me earn her title, and I thought to myself, there's no reason why I cannot be her. Now, putting aside all stereotypes you might think about pageant girls, I knew the Miss America organization to be one that promoted scholarship and service, two things that I was already drawn to in college. But I was at a weird time in my life. I had just graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Legal Studies. I had moved to Missouri, and I had just purchased my first home. So in my life, I thought I had entered real adulthood. With a full-time job, here I was finally putting down my roots. But I defied what I thought in my own head, and I decided to go ahead anyway. I thought that there was no turning back once you reached adulthood, but again, I was wrong. I followed what was pulling at my heart, and I went on to become Miss Missouri. I competed last June, and then in September, I was able to make history as the first openly lesbian woman to compete on the Miss America stage. So these are the three defining moments in my own life. Now, earlier I mentioned the three nuances of being a millennial that have helped shape my journey, and that is entrepreneurship, social justice, and social media. The first is entrepreneurship. I have a very strong entrepreneurial drive, and I believe most millennials do. Our generation is known for going against the grain. We understand that there are multiple paths of life and multiple right ways to be. And so therefore we see the world a little bit differently. We value education, but we crave experience. So we are able to justify seemingly rash decisions and be okay with taking the long way around. The second is social justice. Being in today's political climate, it makes us all very passionate about social issues and causes close to our own hearts. It is only because the timing of my own story is so currently relevant in today's political climate that my three life experiences were able to culminate in a tipping point that accelerated me to acclaim that got me out of the undercover renegade status. My cover was blown. I did not choose it, and I believe that many of us have an undercover renegade within us. So it's just about defining your own defining moments in life and realizing that it's all about timing. The third thing is obvious. It's social media. We all use it. And while I tend to shy away from it, it's what actually pulled my personal story into the spotlight. Yes, I decided to compete for Miss Missouri, but no, I necessarily did not give everybody permission to share my story. And now I've accepted it, but social media is such a big part of our lives that it is the third and final thing that finally blew my cover. So tonight, I want to encourage you all to think about how you can be undercover renegades and how you've probably been making decisions your entire life that may not at first glance seem like they've defied the odds, but upon closer examination, you realize that they do. As a millennial, I think it is really important to understand that the acceptance and acknowledgement of people for who they really are actually increases the value of our collective human capital, and that is incredibly important. So as I close tonight, I want to share with you a quote that has inspired me for years and that has really driven me in every decision that I have made. I believe it drives Ellen, Malala, and Laverne, as they've all been trailblazers and sticking true to who they are. The thing that is really hard and really amazing is giving up on being perfect and beginning the work of becoming yourself. Thank you.